Hello everybody, I'm Ezra Helps, cannabis consultant, and today I'm going to talk about the difference between a medical marijuana patient and a medical marijuana addict, or a marijuana addict, someone who's addicted to marijuana. The difference is subtle, and so we'll get into it. First of all, you can find me at EzraHelps.com. And ask me questions there. You can go to my Facebook page to join the conversation. And you can also now pre-order my book, Cannabis Consulting, on Amazon, which is fun. So that will come out in the summer. So let's get into marijuana addiction. I do think it's an issue. I'm a professional cannabis consultant. It is something that I'm concerned about. But with cannabis, connecting it to anything in our society, I like to compare it to other things. It's been illegal for so long that it's hard to know, well, what is marijuana addiction, and if everyone's in the shadows using it. So first I'm going to talk about what is marijuana addiction in comparison with other drugs. I'm going to talk about medical marijuana use. So how can you use medical marijuana and be an actual patient and either be addicted as a patient or not addicted. And then I'm going to talk about what to do. So what do you do if you are addicted to marijuana, and how to unravel that a little bit. So thanks for joining. So there's something called marijuana use disorder. This is essentially being addicted to marijuana. And according to the National Institute of Health, it affects about 2.5% of marijuana users. So this isn't a huge percentage, but if you have millions of users, that means there's going to be a lot of people who have this. It's defined as the continual use of marijuana despite clinical distress and impairment. Excuse me. What this means is that even though you know that the marijuana is not ultimately helping you, or is making things worse, or is affecting your life somehow, that you continue to do it. So that is the definition of addiction, that you can't stop using something even though it's bad for you. Now, just to compare it, alcohol use disorder, being addicted to alcohol, also affects millions of people, but at about 6% of users, of adult users. So it's almost 3 times as high as marijuana, just to give you a comparison. When we're talking about addiction, it's important to remember that marijuana is not physically addictive. Now, this is sort of hard to define, but essentially things like alcohol, cocaine, tobacco, and opiates actually make your body physically addicted. So once you start using them, if you use them a lot, your body becomes dependent upon them physiologically. And when you stop using them, your body has severe side effects. Now, cannabis is not physically addictive. Your body doesn't become physically in need of cannabis. That doesn't mean you can't be addicted to it. There's plenty of people who have a really hard time stopping using their cannabis, but the withdrawal effects of cannabis are much lower much less severe than other drugs. As far as addiction, cocaine is at least twice as addictive as cannabis. Tobacco is about 3 times addictive. Opiates are 2.5 times addictive. So as far as comparing it with other drugs, cannabis is a lot safer in terms of addiction. It's also because we have an endocannabinoid system. So if you've been following me or gone to my blogs or read anything that I've written, I talk a lot about the endocannabinoid system. It's a system that is the largest cell feedback system in our body. Our cells use chemicals to communicate, and they use endocannabinoids. These are chemicals that we discovered because we started to research what the cannabis plant does to humans when they ingest it. So our body recognizes the chemicals in cannabis as something natural that the body uses. So it's harder to get addicted to chemicals that the body uses all the time readily. Now, part of the reason, I do want to mention that cannabis use disorder, marijuana use disorder, has doubled in the last 10 years. So it's gone up a lot. And there's several reasons for this. One is cannabis has gotten a lot stronger, and more people are using cannabis. It may mean that fewer people are using alcohol and harder drugs, and so they're using cannabis more. As it becomes legal in states, you are of course going to have people using cannabis legally and seeking, hopefully, other drugs less. But it is quite strong. Cannabis is strong. THC, the main ingredient in cannabis, does increase tolerance in users. So if you smoke a joint a day, for example, and you do this for 6 months, eventually you're going to need 2 joints a day to sort of get to the same level. But we also have things like lack of community support. When you have a drug like cannabis that's illegal and the laws surrounding it are very draconian, so that people get, if they get arrested or jail time for cannabis, they're not going to readily share their issues with it, their addiction. So it's important that to legalize it. If we can legalize the drug, then we can be more open about when people are addicted. People can express their addiction. And then I also think there's an issue now, especially with youth, younger people, with this idea that they're using cannabis as medicine. Excuse me. So you have anxiety, you have pain, you can't sleep, you have other ailments, IBS, anything that you feel that cannabis, mood disorders, and you feel that cannabis helps you, it's very easy to say, oh, well, it's my medicine. I have to take this every day. And for a lot of people, this is a really good point. When we're talking about the medical use of cannabis, dosing has not been established by the FDA, so it's very hard to determine. All right, well, you may have someone who's had severe pain, maybe been in an accident or had nerve damage after a surgery, and they need 100 milligrams of cannabis a day. Normally, you might think of this as someone who would be an addict. If you're smoking 100, 200, 300, 400 milligrams a day, you're consuming a huge amount of cannabis. You might be addicted to it. But you could be a completely reasonable adult with pain. You need that much cannabis or THC to go about your life. And then other people who don't have as extreme ailments may need a lot less, but may be more addicted to the drug, may be more dependent upon that, even though they're using less of it. So really, it's subjective. And a great method that I find and that I use with clients is to base your use on 3 things. One is it reducing medication, harmful medication? So if you're using opiates, for example, for pain, and then you introduce cannabis to your regimen and your opiate use goes down, that's a positive benefit from cannabis, even if you are using it chronically, you're using it every day, because opiates are more dangerous. Also, is it reducing symptoms? So if you're using cannabis, and anxiety is a perfect example. People always say, oh, it helps me with my anxiety. Well, is it truly reducing anxiety, or is it only when you're stoned? When you're not stoned, how bad is your anxiety? This is very subjective. There's a lot of people that get stuck in what I call a medicated loop, where they feel anxious. Anxiety is very natural, especially in adults who have mouths to feed and bills to pay and things like this. We live in a stressful culture. And if you smoke pot or consume cannabis in the way that works for you, and it reduces your anxiety, that's fine. But some people find that once the THC wears off, their anxiety goes up even higher. They need to smoke more. Eventually, their receptors for THC get inundated. They get overtaxed and leave the nervous system worn out and anxious. So they smoke more and more and more cannabis to relieve that anxiety, and it's really just exacerbating their anxiety. I see this a lot with people who go to dispensaries and they're not interacting with people who are necessarily aware of their health. They're buying a lot of cannabis to smoke. When you smoke it, this can exacerbate anxiety. And they're buying a lot of things that are strains of cannabis that are sativa. So sativa is associated with being more energetic, more activating, and can induce anxiety and paranoia. A lot of people think, oh, it just feels so good. I'm anxious. I smoke some sativa. Then I'm really happy for a while. And then once it wears off, I need to smoke more because I'm really anxious. This is not following the 3 rules that I lay out. If you're just using more of your medication, right? If cannabis is your medication and you're using it more and more, and it's ultimately harming your anxiety levels, then you need to back off on cannabis. This is an indication that you're using it addictively. Another thing I look out for is if people are only smoking cannabis. Many people get addicted to the ritual. It's satisfying to break up cannabis, put it into a joint, roll it up, go outside, take a few minutes and smoke some pot. This is completely reasonable for your average adult who is not abusing the drug. But that ritual of doing that becomes the addiction. Often I will tell those people, and people come to me to actually reduce their cannabis use, and I'll say, oh, well, have you tried oils? Have you tried ingesting a very boring tasting liquid that you take into your system? You use the cannabis to feel and reduce your anxiety or reduce your pain, and you stop smoking. And a lot of people have a hard time stopping smoking. So this is also a sign that they're addicted to the ritual of it. They're addicted to the quick high of it. And if we're really, truly medicating with cannabis, then we want to make sure that cannabis is on that list of medications that we use as little as possible. I always say the goal of medical marijuana is to use as little medical marijuana as possible so that one day we can just use it recreationally. You know, if you use cannabis for your ailments and then you heal those ailments, they go away, you know, anxiety gets better after a while, then eventually wouldn't it be great if you just smoked pot on the weekends to have fun? Then you become recreationally using cannabis, but not addicted to it. So that medical excuse or use is fine line. Of course, I do have plenty of patients who do not like to get high. They would prefer not to use any drugs at all, but their ailments are so severe and cannabis or THC is what really works for them. And so they have to take in huge amounts of it. In this case, I always say it's very important to change the framework around it. You could medicate with cannabis. You find that smoking it and you smoke 10 joints a day and that's exactly what you need because you were in a severe car accident and you have tons of pain. You still work and you have a job and you feed your kids and you know you can get your work done and move on with your life. But it's important not to frame that smoking or that consumption of marijuana as a social thing you do. You go hang out with your buddies and medicate. You know, we don't typically bring a bottle of ibuprofen to a party and pass it out the party and everybody takes their ibuprofen together. So what I say is if you're going to medicate, if you're committed to using cannabis as medicine, to use it medicinally, then you need to medicate in a proper set and setting. This means to, remove the social aspect, to remove family members who might not be supportive of your cannabis use, and to get yourself in a positive state of mind, to use only the appropriate dose that helps your the symptoms, and to take breaks eventually. So if you're using THC constantly, your tolerance goes up and up and up, and you're using more and more and more, and it's expensive. And so I suggest that people, if they find they're using more and more, they don't love being high all the time, they're worried about marijuana use disorder or being addicted, that you actually take 2 days a month. Just take a 48-hour break. Do this once a month, and it clears the THC intensity from your system. Your receptors that receive the THC can recalibrate, and actually when you go back on after 2 days of taking a break, you need much less to get that medicinal effect. So that's great. I also suggest that people take 2 weeks a year where they go completely off cannabis. So 1 week in the spring, 1 week in the fall, and take a 1 week break from cannabis, totally reset your system. Really ask yourself, am I addicted? Am I using this as medicine? What is my relationship with this drug? We got to think a little bit more deeply. I see a question from Ivy, one of my favorite all-time students from back in the day. It's great to see you, Evie. What's the proper dose a day, you ask? This is an excellent question. The proper dose of cannabis is subjective. This means it's what's right for you. I have clients who take about 1 milligram of cannabis a day. This is essentially like taking 1/10 of a puff of a joint or a blunt or a pipe. It's very hard to deliver that small of a dose by smoking, so they'll take it in an oil form. Some people's daily dose of cannabis is just to put it on topically on their elbow. It's an extremely light dose. They're not getting high from it at all. But I also know people who have severe ailments, people who have cancer. They're trying to fight the drug and fight various symptoms with cancer treatment. And they're taking hundreds, 900, 1,000 milligrams a day. This is an enormous amount of cannabis. So determining the proper dose also comes from taking a break. So once you go off of it and you see how much you need and how you feel, then you can say, gosh, maybe I'm taking too much. I'm going to start in after my break with only half as much. Tons of people miss the opportunity to do what's called microdosing. This is when you take only enough cannabis into your system to get benefits. So your anxiety goes down, or your pain goes down, or you sleep better, but you're not getting cognitively impaired. You're not overly stoned. And it's a really nice sweet spot because you can save money on cannabis, only take what's needed, and then on Friday night, you can do whatever you want. You can take a huge dose of cannabis, get high, have fun, and that's perfectly reasonable. So the other main aspect, if we're thinking about addiction, and I mentioned marijuana addiction as being an issue. If it's going to affect over 1 in 5 people who are using regularly that might have this problem, then the other drugs are far more dangerous. Alcohol, nicotines from cigarettes and tobacco, opiates. These are drugs that can and will kill you. There are incredible studies on the effects of CBD, cannabidiol, helping to reduce the cravings and the addiction properties of these drugs. I have a few patients who have been addicted to opiates, who are on opiates and trying to get off. And I always say, have CBD on you. If you have severe cravings, if you're worried about your intake, even cigarettes, if you're smoking a lot, there are studies they're performing that shows that high doses of CBD can actually attenuate, reduce the need and the cravings for nicotine in cigarettes. This is a way to save someone's life. Introducing CBD into their daily medicinal regimen can be huge. Also for people using marijuana, if somebody's only using THC for anxiety, that is a red flag for me. Eventually, only THC usage will probably, most likely, exacerbate your anxiety. It will increase your anxiety, and you need to add CBD to that. If you're a home grower, start growing plants that are higher in CBD. If you're a cannabis smoker, go to a store that has CBD. Go to my website, buy CBD from me. Find a place where you can start delivering CBD into your system. This will balance your ailments. It will decrease the amount of THC that you need for reducing symptoms. And a lot of the CBD products are also going to just do the same thing that THC does. CBD is anti-anxiety. CBD is analgesic. That means it reduces pain. CBD can soften muscle spasms, can reduce cramps. And so it's really important to have CBD in your regimen. I personally like THC. I enjoy cannabis. And if I take too much THC into my system, I know that I have to start adding CBD to it because I get anxious from it. So a lot of this comes from personal experience. Now, how am I doing on time? I'm over already. Obviously, this is a subject that I'm passionate about, primarily because I think cannabis is far less dangerous, far less addictive than other harsh drugs and products that are readily available and totally legal. So if you're gonna be addicted to something, cannabis is a much safer addiction. I call it addiction light. It doesn't mean that it can't really affect you and ruin some people's lives. Some people get so addicted to cannabis that they never quite get out of that stupor. But I think that has a lot to do with being depressed, being anxious, having mood disorders, and never addressing them. So I'm going to wrap up by saying the most important thing, whether we're talking about addiction of opiates, addiction to television, addiction to shopping, addiction to cigarettes, or cannabis, this comes down to community support. There is no magic pill to prevent people from being addicted or to reduce people's addiction. It requires people having positive support members in their community, being open about their usage of drugs, and making sure that people are getting educated. I get frustrated by schools and doctors and law enforcement just saying, oh, don't do marijuana, don't do drugs, it's really bad for you. Excuse me. But the important thing is, all right, well, what about the people who are doing those drugs? How are we going to help them? How do we stay in touch with those people? How do we connect with them? If you're an uncle or a cousin or a sibling or a parent or a child of somebody who's addicted to cannabis, reach out to them. Talk to them about CBD. Ask them if there's a different way they can approach using cannabis. And the key for cannabis addiction is that since it's not going to ever kill you, you cannot die from taking cannabis, you do have to have other people around you to say, look, you're using too much. You have to move forward in your life. And that's the biggest indicator for me. When people are stagnant in their life, they're not getting a new job, they're not getting over their ailments or their mood or their tragedy or their sadness or their depression, and they're just medicating with cannabis, then that's a time to dig deeper. Go to a therapist, talk to people, take a break from cannabis, have a deeper experience around your life. And then once you move to the new place, you go to talk therapy, you feel better, you get through a trauma perhaps, then you can introduce cannabis into your life and use it medicinally, use it recreationally. All right, I went over, but thank you for joining. Evie Ocasio, so great to see you. And join me next week for my live cast, 11 a.m., same time. You can find me at EzraHelps.com and pre-order my book, Cannabis Consulting, on Amazon.com. Take care, everybody.